I went to the movies and the first time for at least 2 years to see something that I actually wanted to see, which was one battle after another by Paul Thomas Anderson. It seems that if you want to make any film that wants to be remotely good, you have to be some kind of a director that's been established from the 90s, like, Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, now Paul Thomas Anderson. So, it doesn't seem like any new directors are able to get through, but the older ones, like, they seem to have some sort of creative reign on their projects. And the interesting thing about One Battle After Another was it was based loosely on Vineland, the novel by Thomas Pynchon, which I've read. So yeah, it was keen to see how that looked on the big screen. I wasn't a huge fan of Inherent Vice, the film, but maybe that deserves a rewatch. But anyway, I went to the movies and I found it interesting how the this film can really be interpreted on a couple of levels. Like Leo's character Bob, who's I guess the Zoid Wheeler from Vineland, he and his partner, and then uh, their daughter, they act on the side of like the revolution, and especially at the start of the film when it's very focused on like the border with US and Mexico, and which is a very relevant political issue of the last decade. And the Colonel Lockjaw, played by Sean Penn, who is like this cartoonish uh, villain who ends up being taken in by like the Christian Society, or sorry, the Christmas Society, and then it's sort of hilarious how that turns out, and the I guess contradictions that Lockjaw's living. And that sort of gets exposed to the Christmas Society, and then they decide that they want to eliminate him ultimately, which hilariously doesn't work the first time, and he'll have to go again. But the the Christmas Society almost running like they're on a higher level than the actual plot of the film. Like they're going after Lockjaw, but they're not um, really interested in what he's up to, like this mission that he's on. They're just like, oh well, he has a mixed race child, so he's not allowed in the society. Also interesting that I guess the Christmas Society, or Christians are allowed to be like, made fun of like that, representing the establishment of the US and the army, which you know somewhat potentially true, but I think with a lot of Pynchon's work, he really gets into like how complicated and like the paranoia of what's really going on, what's the story behind the story. So I think to see in the film that it's just Christians is I don't know, it seems a bit surface level, or like it's not really penetrating the surface as to the spirit of what Pynchon thinks, or at least what he presents in his work. And yeah, I mean, the Christians are allowed to be made fun of and criticized, which I think is fine. But then there's other groups who I couldn't imagine being allowed to criticize in that way in a mainstream movie like this. But anyway, let's just accept that the Christians can be presented as the bad guys. But yes, it is interesting because Leo and his family and the revolution are presented as, especially in the opening of the film, they're presented as sort of the good guys. But as the film goes on, it does make clear that their side is wrought with um, regret and confusion, and that maybe this revolutionary activity is not uh, an idealistic way to live. Sometimes it might be necessary, but it really shows the fallout of Bob and his. Even when they have the daughter, like his partner wants to keep fighting, and Bob's sort of saying that we have a family now. Let's shut up shop and move on with our lives. Like we need to focus on our lives, which is, I think, very relevant today. People get caught up in the news and, politicians and, the world's ending, and they lose focus on what's right in front of them, which Bob was trying to do. He was trying to get his family's focus back on what mattered. But, his partner, she wants to keep fighting, and there's another great scene where his partner's mother, this older black lady, was telling Bob that she thought he was a bad match for her daughter, and that he looks confused and lost. And I think these, like, people who, whatever side you follow down, um, rabbit holes or conspiracy theories or paranoia, uh, or revolution, it's sort of never ending. And there's this good montage with uh, Bob's partner, and she's just like blowing up buildings, and it's like just every issue, like race, abortion, um, borders. It just goes like bang, 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 and it's like there's no end game. There's no end to what she wants to revolutionize. It's just this ongoing process that will never end. And Bob, he's seen as being confused and lost, and then 16 years go by, and we come to this scene where he's on the phone, which was my favorite scene in the film, where he's yelling at the guy on the other end, who was revealed later to be, a character that we've seen earlier, who's running like some kind of like, not like a podcast, but like this underground messaging system. Like it's very crying of Lot 49, which is another book by Pynchon, where they talk about the communication methods, and that you want to have communication methods that are off the grid, so that you're not traceable. And it's like how he doesn't have an iPhone, and but then these communication networks that you build can be co-opted by surveillance, or like they, like them, whoever it is. So um and so another part of that is that they have to have extreme security measures. And this culminates in Bob, who's spent decades at this point going down rabbit holes, and, as he says, being in love with alcohol and drugs, and he's trying to remember passwords that he wouldn't have read for more than 10 years. And it's very funny how it plays out. And I think when I was watching it in the movies, there were uh, I was just I was laughing so hard, because it was like just this classic Pynchon character. Like, even one of his aliases is Rocket Man, which is a nod to Slothrop from Gravity's Rainbow. And Slothrop's just this character who, against the epic backdrop of World War II, he is stumbling around trying to get laid most of the time, and he even, like, gets with this girl who's like so clearly a spy, but he doesn't care, because he is just lost in this world. And that's almost like Bob here. Like, he's just this humorous character in this just maze, this network, and this maze that is just so hard to comprehend. And yeah, I think it culminates in this scene on the phone where he's yelling at the guy. And um, it's funny, because it's sort of like this is where this revolution stuff leads. Like, a lot of this film, even though the ending was very positive, where it was like his daughter's like, well, yeah, let's get back and keep, you know, keep fighting. Like you have to choose to keep fighting, which she does. Um, but really, this film, I think it shows a lot of the consequences of reckless behavior and uh, being a revolutionary, and maybe even things like getting on surveillance lists like Bob does, where it just stays with him or it catches up with him. It's not he may get away initially, but it's like with the improving technology and surveillance, like then he has to spend the rest of his life in this paranoid state. I mean, he doesn't have to be paranoid, but it's I mean that's a quote I think from Gravity's Rainbow is that yes, I'm paranoid, but am I paranoid enough? And for Bob, like his daughter sees him as really paranoid, but the movie proves that he has a right to be paranoid because they're after him, and it's only by all their paranoid planning that the daughter's like allowed to escape briefly, and Bob can escape too with all these networks and these this planning. But even I think the daughter's she's away with like the nuns, and then one of the nuns says, "I'm just so sick of this fighting," and I guess like the whole movie is really in the title, one battle after another. It's like it's not an ideal way to live, but some people they find themselves trapped in this, like whether Bob, it's like he's sort of permanently in it at this point, but other people, it's like his daughter at the end, like she's sort of free at that point, but chooses to go back into the battle. It's like maybe part of the human condition that we crave the battle as much as we crave to be safe. Uh, I enjoyed that, even though there was a lot of stuff about the border, there wasn't a lot of like overt political talk like about Trump would have been a classic one to have in there, or anyone else. Like it wasn't a clear, even though right at the start of the film it almost baits you in that it's going to be this clear like good versus evil. It's it really keeps a lot of the political stuff out of it, and it just shows you like the impacts of these lifestyles on the people who are on the ground living it, like these hardcore revolutionaries and the soldiers. So it keeps out of this like political armchair, and it doesn't really moralize too much. It's just showing like human life in this world, in this environment, and it is a very Pynchonian world, but it is also very realistic. I think one thing I don't know if it would want me to rewatch this film a lot is how real it is. Like it's not very artistically abstract. It occurs in America, like in Mexico. You it's not like a Mulholland Drive where it's uh, this dream logic. It's like this is a very real world, and it is turned up to 11 in a few instances, especially with Lockjaw's character. But it's very real. It's I guess dark and gritty, especially when Leo's trying to find his way to safety. It's not a very it's not a very calming or pleasant or like a film that you like feeling witty or like clever about watching. Like the film is very clever the way it presents it's the story and the themes, but uh, it doesn't make you feel smug for getting it or understanding it. It makes it you feel the conflict, and it's it's like you kind of want I guess the characters to succeed, but you don't. It's not a romantic world. It's not. It's a brutal world. Um, yeah, it was good, but it was just a uh, a challenging experience. Like I don't think it would be like one of these 50 classic films that you'd want to just turn on and watch. Even once a year probably. Um, but no, it was good. I liked the way that at the start it makes you feel very much like it's going to be good and evil, but then even everything's mixed up. Like there's interracial couples, which I think is great because it doesn't make it a race issue so much. It puts I guess people from different races on different sides. So it's more about just as people dealing with these wars or these battles. Um, yeah, I think again something I like to pick up in movies is just the people can fall back on the beginning and the end, which is sort of the most memorable parts of the film. But really, a lot of the times the good stuff in films is in the middle. And I think that this film was like that as well because the start and the end can make this look like a hero story, but the middle showed how confusing and horrible this stuff is. I mean, the answer's not as simple as well, you can't fight or be a revolutionary or want change in the world for the better, but it does show that if that's the path you want to take, it can be very permanent. And there's a few good scenes of people going to interrogation and just folding like pretty quickly. Like they go in tough and thinking, like then let's say, oh, I'm not afraid, and they might lie, but soon like the interrogator will be like, well, we've got your sister, or you're going to go to jail. Like they'll or torture them. Like they it dismantles this notion of standing up to authority, I think, which is an interesting message because you sh- you should stand up to authority for what you believe in. But I think this film explores a very realistic portrayal of what that actually entails, both in the moment with the force you'd be up against and the consequences of that down the line. And it wraps it all in a very humorous story for the most part, which it is slow at times, I'll say. There's a lot of long stretches where there's only piano music and like scenes seem to go on for a long time, but cutting back between two locations, which I thought was made it a little bloated. But overall, it's yeah, it takes a funny look at I guess people who are in these battles and maybe don't know how they got there in the first place, but they're just trying their best or just trying to work it out one day at a time.